Welcome to CAD Talks, tackling issues in your community.
Find out what's out there, who's out there, and for these groups to maybe do some collaborations afterwards and things like that. It's just good to get a bit of information out. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pass it on to Jackie Robinson, who is kindly from Wellbeing Lancashire, who are going to be co-hosting all these talks. So occasionally you won't have me, which might be a good thing. You might have one of our other team, but Jackie's going to stay on with all of these and everything. So quite happy to pass her on to the expert.
I don't know about that. So hi everybody, it's just an honour to be invited to co-host these programmes. I've been running similar programmes called Thrive Not Just Survive, but I just think isn't it fantastic that we can all collaborate and get together and really work on topics that are really important, and there's nothing more important than this today, in my opinion. So Wellbeing Lancashire, a little bit about that. It's a group of wellbeing providers. I've got my own business called The Balance Approach, and 10 of us got together over the COVID period and decided something better needs to happen in Lancashire, as we're always being told we're the poor sister, or poor brother, aren't we? So we are determined to get wellbeing as a priority in Lancashire, and perhaps then go further out of there. So I'll be telling you a little bit more about that as we go along. But without further ado, I just want to do a little Zoom check with you all. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but if not, on the bottom panel, if the speakers can keep themselves unmuted, and if those are not speaking, if you could possibly mute yourself now. That's just so that there's no interference in the background, it sometimes is. My suggestion is at the top right-hand corner, you will see speaker view or gallery view. If you put it on gallery view, this is the way you'll be able to get the most out of today. So if you can just put it on gallery view, that will help you today. And as each speaker comes on, you will be able to hear and see them speak. So I would like to start introducing the different speakers. I actually, Elliot, you might have to help me out with this, but I know we have Graham Sims. Graham, hi Graham. If Graham, you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you hope to get out of today.
Well, I run quite a few different dads groups that help alongside the mental health and kind of that sort of area. I also run a group called Team Kickabout with Peter Brooks, who that's more about kind of getting dads out there, helping with fitness and mental health. So a lot of the stuff I do is revolved around the mental health side of things.
Fantastic, Graham. I'm excited to hear all about what you do and what we can do to help today's topic. Gillian Brooks. Hi, Gillian.
Hello.
If you can.
Yeah, I'm totally ill prepared as a speaker. I didn't realise.
I'm sure you've got it all in here.
Yeah, it's all there. I'll start just by saying I made a film about, so many years ago now, it's 17 years since my husband died by suicide. And he had a lot of issues in life, a lot of drug-related issues. But I had the best of him for a lot of years, and we have 3 children. So he died when they were young. He killed himself by fire, which was quite a violent way, and I chose not to tell my children, and I felt there was a huge taboo around suicide, so I didn't want to be defined by this. So then I ended up, it was a few years after he died, I just decided I needed to write everything that I felt and explain to the children who he was and how he'd come to be where he was at, because they saw the best years of his life and they had no idea that he had basically, he had had a traumatised childhood, and like a lot of traumatised children, had turned to drugs for pain relief as an adult, and that was his coping mechanism. So when I met him, he never relearnt his coping mechanism. So I have been able to make sense of his suicide, but living with somebody like that we were together 17 years, and so I saw the best and the worst of him. And so I decided just to write everything down, all my feelings. It came very spontaneously in the form of a letter to my then dead husband. And then my daughter, many years later, asked if she could perform it for her final performance. And then from there, it was made into a film. So it's a half-hour film, and I've been involved with
that. I think it's fantastic. We need to really get this story. Sorry to interrupt, but just want an introduction. I know you've been through.
Oh, sorry, I'm rattling, aren't I?
No, it's such a heartfelt story. I didn't want
sorry,
to.
I'm straight in there.
But I do want to hear the story, and I know everybody else does. And we're going to get everybody together and tell the story. And it's so
just lovely. A quick interlude in there. If anybody would like to watch the film, the event actually is on Eventbrite, and it is on our Connect My community for you to sign up, get your virtual seat ticket if you want to do that. And Gillian's going to be doing a Q&A after that as well.
Yeah,
so, great. Little plug
yeah.
there.
and I would like to go back to you and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Sorry about that.
No,
got a bit carried away.
Susie from Lancashire Positive Minds. Hi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Susie Marsden. We set up Lancashire Positive Minds in December 2019. Initially, it was going to be face-to-face group meetings, and this is for parents and carers who are supporting their young through mental health difficulties. We don't set an age limit to those mental health difficulties, and we have a variety of that coming to our group. COVID happened, but we are managing to carry on as we are. And I think just talking about suicide, I think that's why I'm here, because it is really important that we do talk about it and address it. I've had personal experience around suicide, so just be interesting to get together and see how we all work.
Yep, that's lovely. Thank you. And we have Leslie Whitaker, who's going to come on now and tell us a little bit about what you do. I do have it written down. Enhancing Experience Matron. Have I got that right?
It is, yeah. It's a bit of a mouthful. So yeah, I'm Leslie. It's my 4th week in the trust.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So thank you for the invite and the friendly welcome from everybody. I guess I was interested in suicide prevention in my last position. So I was in sunny Stoke-on-Trent, and I led on quite a lot of work around suicide prevention with local communities. I worked really well with public health and the council and the police, etc., around trying to reduce suicide in Stoke-on-Trent. So I've come up to Lancashire, and I guess part of my job is going to be around learning lessons from any unexpected deaths. So I guess suicide is going to be part of that. So I'm here on behalf of the Lancashire and South Cumbria. Although I don't have an actual remit for suicide prevention as such, I do have an interest, and I guess I've probably reviewed in my time over 120 suicides. So I guess I've got all those stories in my mind, which is helpful sometimes when doing this kind of work.
Thank you, Leslie. I think that's right, Ellie, isn't it? For speakers.
Yes, correct. Yeah, Rachel unfortunately is very poorly. She couldn't make it.
No, that's a shame. Yeah, so Elliot is going to tell us a few stats now, which I'm really interested in, and they are like live, aren't they, to sort of today's stats?
Yeah, I left it late and picked them up yesterday, so if anybody wants to check these out, these are actually on the Lancashire Government's website under the Health Insight for Mental Health and Self-Harm. So what we tend to use is they tend to do statistics based on rates per 100,000 of the population. Now, I've purposely done this as age 10 plus as opposed to just adults, because I know some of the speakers have children involved in that, and it's important to cover it across the board. I'll go a little bit more into that later on to why that's more important. But if we look at it based on the suicide rate of England, for example, England have a suicide rate of 9.6. For all persons in central Lancashire, that stat is actually 11.8. And for males in central Lancashire is 18.2. Female rate is around about 5.7 compared to the England 4.7, but it's still high. And if we're looking at it around the 12 districts of Lancashire, Preston and Chorley are the two highest, but Chorley is actually the highest with 15.4. And if we compare that down to the 9.6 rate, that is pretty high. And just for a bit of context on that, Lancaster, Chorley and Preston actually account for a third of all deaths in the whole of Lancashire, which is just ridiculous. What we also wanted to look at regarding that was the admissions of intentional self-harm that have, for hospital admissions. So using it again for Lancashire as 12 districts and England is 193.4, whereas Lancashire is 202.2, with Preston being the highest at 218.9. These rates are incredibly high for when we consider it for the rest of England, and we've got to look at the reasons to why that is. So that's the statistics. We can come back to Jackie, and we can go on to some of these questions and see if we can get some.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. I think I'm actually quite shocked by that. I don't know about anybody else. It really puts it very, very real, doesn't it? And it is very real, and it's increasing more and more, well, due to the situation we have at the moment. And it is real for me as well. A family friend 2 weeks ago took her life, and it was someone you would never expect, or wouldn't even know she had any mental health problems or issues, or you know, possibly we just don't understand what happened. But it's very real, and we've got to educate people, haven't we, to be looking out for signs, or just reaching out to each other. I think we need to be kinder and sharing and having more things like this, more educational, more talk. I just think it helps. So yeah, I'd love to get the conversation flowing now with the speakers. That's the setup of today. We're going to have the 4 speakers. So if you've got it on a gallery view, you will be able to or speaker view, you'll be able to see as they talk. So if we can have the 4 speakers, basically you've got a few questions, haven't you, Elliot?
Yeah, how I thought we'd run it is I'd ask the question, and then anybody from the 4 of you of the panel would like to maybe shout out and have that sort of idea of what the question might be. So the first one is why do we think that compared to the rest of England, central Lancashire have got the highest rates, especially like Chorley and Preston being 2 of the highest? Why do we think that is, being based in those areas? Anybody want to jump in?
Yes.
I don't, oh, sorry, go on.
Go on, Leslie.
I would just wanted to ask Elliot, over which time frame are those statistics?
That was done, let's see, because obviously they've got to record backwards, haven't they? So that was based off the statistics of 2018.
Yeah, so I know, you know, we had the same difficulty in Stoke. We had quite high rates. We're quite a deprived area. But the problem is with these statistics is when they come from the coroners, there's obviously a couple of years delay before we get accurate data. So we're always lagging a couple of years behind, which doesn't help. I know the Office of National Statistics is always a year in front, so we can maybe get 2019's data off there.
I did have 2019, and Preston had been overtaken by Chorley. They tend to go off each other at the moment, but there was still, I think they're both in the top 5 highest rates in the UK. Yeah.
So just something to bear in mind. I don't know if you know, but last year some of the verdicts, the way that they give a verdict via a coroner, it did change, and that was following a case in Oxford. So you might know that it used to have been based on the coroner would have to be 100% sure, based against any probable doubt that the person intended to die, to get a verdict of suicide. Now that has changed, and I know a lot of groups like Papyrus and that kind of happy with that, because it was based on it being against a criminal kind of ruling, whereas a lot of people, you know, wanted to get away from that because it, you know, it used to be a crime to do this, and now it isn't, obviously. So the coroner, there's more liable to be an increase in the suicide verdicts now. So, for example, we had a lady who we thought took her own life by a certain method that meant that anybody that found her would think she intended to take her life, but she didn't get a verdict to suicide because the coroner wasn't 100% sure that she intended to die. Whereas now, since these coronial changes, that lady would probably get a verdict as a suicide. So I think we are going to see an increase in suicide regardless of the kind of picture socially. So I think that is worth bearing in mind. And I think that's probably why the UK appointed the first Minister of Suicide. And I think we're the first country to have that. I think they're kind of predicting that they're going to see an increase in the rates of suicide.
Well, that's quite interesting. I'm sorry, I'm butting in, but I didn't know we had a Minister of Suicide.
Yes, I could remember a name if I had a memory. I can definitely send the name for you. But yeah, it's a female lady. I've met her at a conference. So yes, I guess that's a government lead on suicide.
That's so important. That's a step forward, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Has any of the other speakers got any insight or thought process? We've all got thoughts, haven't we, of why that might be? Why is it higher in central Lancashire?
You were going to say something, Susie?
I think it was around, because if you look at Chorley in comparison to Preston, Chorley is a lot smaller than Preston. So that alone is quite worrying, that it's a smaller town, but the rates are very similar. So it would be, what is happening in that sort of area is around, it's a less deprived area. Is the support just not visible in that area? And I think it's probably worth looking at where they have got lower rates, what are they doing in their areas that we're potentially not doing in central Lancashire? And it's getting a better understanding, I think, of that, really. And it's how do we do that? So yeah, that's quite worrying, those figures, to be honest. I think you stumped me a bit with Elliot. Those
Can I actually interrupt on that?
Yeah, Catherine, isn't it?
Yeah, Catherine. Yeah. I know that Chorley services, council services, were quite dramatically cut back about 5-6 years ago. I mean, right back to the bare bone. So that could, I don't know about Preston, but I do know that Chorley was cut right back to the bare bone. So possibly, like you were saying, the support services aren't there in Chorley.
Yeah, I think, there's a possibility that we've got to look at every avenue, haven't we? I know Chorley Hospital I have a big unit, haven't they, mental health unit in Chorley, which quite a lot of people from Preston are sent to. It's just hard to understand because it's so much smaller, and it's quite rural, Chorley. I live in the Chorley borough, actually, which is great. But it's a huge spread out area of lots of rural villages as well as the town, isn't it? So it's something we need to look at, and we're going forward. I haven't got any clue of why that would be.
I actually think that I went to Chorley about a few months ago, which I've not been for years, and I was quite horrified about how run down the centre is compared to the way it used to be. So possibly it's because it is out of the way, like the lack of jobs and prospects for young people. I'm not saying it's young people, but I mean, have you got any statistics on the breakdown of the people that's actually committed suicide in Chorley?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
The age.
No, because for this sort of like little talk and everything, with it not being that long, we were just going to do these sort of rounds and everything. It is something that needs to be properly looked into, because Jackie and I were talking about this actually at the beginning before everybody came on, and we said that the suicide rates in the youth is actually growing more because of how technology is and everything, with more people being online and things like that, more information regarding that. So it would be good to maybe get a breakdown of that at a later point. But I think you can find it online.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out. Sam, you wanted to, it's not Sam. I don't know where I got Sam from. Graham, sorry.
He's just taking a phone call.
Oh, is it? Oh, bless.
Can I would just like to say, am I all right to speak?
Yeah, of course.
I don't really know the areas that well, but what I do feel is I think we put a lot of emphasis on mental health, so-called mental health issues, but I don't think we put enough on social conditions and the recent times and the effects of austerity and unemployment and hopelessness and those feelings that are felt by so many people that are increasing in a very, not a well-balanced society, really. And I think that we never really address that. And the effects of, really awful jobs, really awful housing, and no hope for the future. And I do think that this is something we ought to start talking about in suicide prevention. So we spend a lot of time talking about putting nets over bridges and, preventing in that way, but we're not talking about actually creating change in our environment. And also people are very disconnected from each other and very alone, and these are basic human, there will be a demographic who fall into that, of being alone and isolated, nowhere to go, no love, no hope, sort of human things that we need to address. And I think that's across the board, and maybe it is particularly bad in these areas, but I think that we're always sort of saying it might be a mental health problem, and I personally think we need to move away from that model.
Funnily enough there, Gillian, our next thing was, what do we think we could do, what do you feel needs to change to be able to lower these rates? And you just hit it right on the head. It's education and things like that. I said it to Jackie earlier this morning. I said I'd learnt trigonometry at school. I don't think I've ever used it in my adult life, but if they had taught me about, not have to be like suicide prevention, but mental health, suicide things, all those different things in school now, that is so important when we think about online bullying and all the other things and everything. So yeah, absolutely agree. Yes, Leslie.
Yeah, sorry, you know that obviously in my team, Sam works, he's part of the Change Talks. So Sam obviously works with lots of local schools. A couple of things I was thinking about when you were talking, Gillian, I think we definitely found in our area, and I think it's the same here, that 1 or 2 out of 4 people who do take their own life have never even been to the GPs, never mind sought help from a mental health service. So we're kind of blind really as to what drives people who, like you mentioned, Jackie, nobody had a clue, they're not engaging in services, they've never said they feel this way, they just go out and do it. So that makes it difficult, doesn't it, to kind of predict. I don't know if you've looked, Elliot, at the NKISH report, but they're out there for everybody to look at. That's NCISH NKISH. So that's an annual report that's published by the University of Manchester, and that's based on all the suicides across the UK. And he every year does a kind of 100-page report on what they're noticing, what the trends are. I know that he said, Louis Appleby, who leads on that, said about 6-8 weeks ago that, a lot of people are saying that the suicide rate's gone up, but statistically, it's not a significant rise that we can notice that it's during COVID that we can actually sort of start, we can start considering it, but we shouldn't start panicking about it because it is such a small number at the moment. So I think it's really important that in these sort of sessions, that your data is, you're happy that your data's 100% accurate, as up to date as it can be, because if 20 of us go away and say, suicide in Lancashire is going through the roof, it just starts to, people start to kind of worry about that. So yeah.
Can I just make a
what I was going to say is, if anybody's got anything they would like to add, if they want to, they could happily take off the mute and ask those questions. Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I think it's just around, obviously, there was just that point brought up around the fact that quite often people haven't engaged with services. And I think that's the thing, it is almost that education piece. So for me, part of my problem of why I wasn't engaging was because in my head it was like, I've got a roof over my head, I've got food on the table, and I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I think that, you know, I think that's the thing, the kind of messages perhaps that we need to get out there for people are that, you know, you don't necessarily have to have been through a massive trauma. You don't necessarily have to be really suffering the effects of you know, poverty, or you don't necessarily, you know, it can affect anyone. And hopefully the fact that, you know, people like footballers and royals are talking out about mental health problems will help people to see that. But I don't think that message was about, for me, like over the last 5 years. So I actually felt guilty that I was having those thoughts, and so I kept them to myself. And I think that's probably not an unusual story when you hear so many cases where people go, I never expected it, we never saw a sign, we never, you know, there's no reason why they should have done it. So, you know, I think that is definitely an area that where messaging needs to happen somewhere, that makes people realise that you cannot be well, even though in your own mind you think you should be, and you think you've no reason to feel that bad.
Oh, so that's
thank you for
sharing that, Paul, for sharing that. Honestly, you know, it's so difficult, isn't it? And no one should feel guilty for feeling these things. But I can understand why would you try and rationalize it in your own head. But that is interesting, isn't it? That's something. Really, I think you've hit it on the head there. So I would imagine a lot. Also, I don't know the actual facts there about, you know, you finding out the reasons why people do things is actually, I think people who actually do are successful in committing suicide probably have not accessed services, and that's something, an area we need to look at, isn't it? I think.
And that was definitely true for me, that I didn't, apart from getting tablets from a doctor, I didn't, you know, I'd almost made my mind up I was going to do it, and so didn't access anything and didn't want to tell anybody that that's what my thoughts were, because you feel guilty that it sends out a message that you don't love your family, that you don't, you know, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Sorry, Graham.
Through obviously a lot of the work that I've done over the last few years, what we tend to see a lot is that, like we've already touched on before, the services aren't funded well enough, so there's massive waiting lists. They're not able to see people within a required time, which means by the time they do get to see them, they've either already done it, they're close to doing it, or like it's got a hell of a lot worse. So a lot of, I mean, I know there's a lot of groups out there like mine, like Men Here, and there's a lot of other mental health groups that kind of help one-to-one support, but it's getting the message out there that these groups are about, that they can help. And it's trying to encourage people to talk. Like Paul said, sometimes you feel like you don't want to bother other people, or you just feel so down about the fact that you feel down. It starts this really bad spiral, and we need to kind of get it out there that there's people will listen, people will support. And if the funding isn't there, set up independent groups. Just make sure there is something out there for everybody.
Am I allowed to talk? Sorry.
Yes, of course.
I think that, like, the sort of people power in this, or sort of having little group organically, it's to do with money at the end of the day. But I mean, not everyone who's feeling down thinks they need to go and see a GP, and it isn't necessarily medical. So, you know, I come across people who are very distressed, having been bereaved by suicide, but actually they wouldn't want to go to the doctors and be prescribed pills. What they need is human support, and that's what we need. We need more places that people can go without thinking, oh, I'm using a space that someone else should have. If we have more things to offer people that are just from the care of people in the community, rather than it being a medicalised top-down thing, I think that's the way forward, where we genuinely care for each other. And there are places where people can go and meet without feeling that they're stepping into a medical area, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense.
Just before we move on to the next bit, I was just about to, you've just put your hand up, I was just about to send you a private message. Did you want to share anything, Elaine? You have to unmute yourself. Oh, there we go.
Okay. Hi, I'm actually here for, I live in Preston and I speak from lived experience. So I am actually a volunteer for Lancashire Recovery College as well. So I've been listening and I'm shocked at the stats for both Chorley and Preston, but I can give you a little bit more insight to Preston.
Okay.
I was diagnosed about 2-3 years ago, in fact 2 years ago, with emotional unstable personality disorder. And because I actually struggled with that, when I actually got my diagnosis, I didn't have the help that I needed. And it's not through the fault of the NHS, don't get me wrong. It's through lack of funding, obviously. But there is a lot of help out there if you can find it. There are groups, for example, obviously Lancashire Recovery College is brilliant, and I am a co-facilitator for that, and I speak with experience. But I think with me, I was let down, and I'm sorry to say, but by the crisis team in Preston. And it's just, if I would have had that early intervention about where I can go and I'm not alone and the support that I needed, I don't think I would have got that far down the line. And if it wasn't for my other half, I wouldn't be here now. And it's to her and not to the NHS that I'm actually here to tell you the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not surprised at the fact that that there really does need to be more help out there. In respect that you're not alone, and because you've got a diagnosis with something like that, there is help, but I don't think there's enough.
I really appreciate
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Can I just butt in again? Sorry, is there a possibility?
Yeah.
We'll allow it.
Something that nobody's covered, I'm a nutritionist, by the way. Something that nobody's covered is the impact of diet on your mental health. It has a massive impact on your mental health. The education isn't there in schools, and obviously there's a lot of people don't really know what to eat to actually have really good mental health. I actually was suicidal about 5 years ago myself, and I got myself better with nutrition. That's how I became a nutritionist. Mental food, really good food does impact you in a positive manner, and people do not know that. That's all I want to say.
No, I really appreciate that one, because I do agree with that, absolutely. I have other underlying conditions as well, and having the impact of food on my mental and physical health has made it from a point that instead of being in the house and in the bedroom potentially 6 days out of the week, has made it that I'm now 5 days at work and occasional going out at weekends and being able to do these talks. So I, more than a lot of other people, know the massive impacts on food and drink and all these other things and everything. But yeah, I absolutely agree that it can have a massive, massive impact on your mental health, and we do need to get more information out there. And that's why this is really important to have these sort of talks, because these wouldn't be talks that would be normally brought out. So I appreciate that.
And I think Gillian, I loved Gillian's point there. It's really that simple, isn't it? We just need to be more caring, more kind, and look at everything more holistically, because it doesn't have to be one particular thing, does it, that's affected you? But it's about people reaching out. Nutrition, of course, is so important. The more sugar you have, we all know that it gives you extreme highs and then extreme lows, but we're not educated enough about that. And all the children's food that we see has got so much sugar in, which is unbelievable. But yeah, I love these things that are coming out of this conversation. Thank you.
Susie has a very good point on the chat, that social media plays a massive impact. I know from experience, seeing a lot of the what I hear in the dads groups, that like kind of exes withholding children, things like that, they're then posting things on social media, which without social media they would never have seen.
Yeah.
So these are starting to act as triggers because it's so easily accessible. Information is accessible. People's lives and their stories and everything that they do is it's obviously something we're never going to be able to ban, but it's something that hopefully at some point we're going to be able to control, so that it's not being used as a trigger and more as a kind of enjoyable thing.
And I think you're absolutely right there, Graham, because children as young, at a very young age, can search how to do ligatures, which vein to cut, and all of these things that, the young children, so they shouldn't be accessing that sort of so freely and as they can.
They should be sat on the park talking about boys and girls.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a teenager, so yeah, maybe I'd prefer to do that. I guess.
Playing with the dolls, maybe.
yeah. And I think I did put something in a message. I lost a best friend last year to suicide, and we did talk openly. And I can remember the week before asking him outright, "Do you think you're going to commit suicide?" And he couldn't answer me, and he stopped talking for that whole week while he was planning what he was going to do with his life. And it's up until that point, there was something that kept him here, whether it was his friends and his family, or he felt he had purpose. But in those final hours where he chose to end his life that day, all those thoughts must have just disappeared. And it's understanding at what point does that person get to where what keeps them here no longer wants to keep them here and be alive.
Yeah. Thanks, Susie. Again, yeah, it is. How do we get to that point? When it's your best friend or family member, we think we know them so well, but I think possibly it's those people they try and protect. So they're the last people they're probably going to talk to, or their best friends and their family, because they know it's going to hurt them so much. So they're more likely, probably, just my thoughts, talk to someone who is not involved in their life. And so these groups that we're talking about, and these individual groups, are so important. And Elaine mentioned the group that she is part of. I think these groups are absolutely vital, places that they can go to that they're not involved in their life. Thanks.
Jackie, just to second that, I've definitely found that that because of what I mentioned before, that almost feeling of the guilt with my family of why am I so down, that it was so much easier eventually once it became apparent that to everyone else that I've been harboring suicidal thoughts for years. Once I asked for the help, talking with strangers whether they be professionals or people on groups, and saying, this is how I feel, and then finding out there are other people who actually had that same experience was really valuable. And then it actually sort of made it possible for me then to start having those conversations with my family and friends. And so I think that's the problem. It's almost that gateway. It's giving people the confidence and permission to say that they're not all right. And then it's making sure that we're really signposting the different options to discuss that you're not all right. And that, I think that's the problem at the moment. It's almost like, some people still see like ringing the Samaritans as a stigma, I'll be, that's admitting failure kind of thing. And that's the thing that we need to do. It's almost that giving people a real range of options, so that once we've managed to convince people it's all right to admit that you're not in a good place, that there's then a wide range of things that you can do to address that.
Paul, that's correct, and especially as you've had lived experience of this, that's really powerful what you've just said, actually, isn't it? That you to find those groups and to give you permission that it's okay to feel like that, and also you're actually seeking help. Then you don't want to do it, you want to seek the help, and that's something we need to look at. Thank you.
So if we want to just move on to we're going to talk about like what support is out there. We've talked about a lot of the things that the problems that are there, and all the things that we do need to get more information on. But we want to talk a little bit more about what support is out there as well now. So if anybody knows, obviously the people that are talking here will have their own places and that, but I would like to know what support is out there.
There's a lot of stuff currently kind of flying around, things like Andy's Man Club. There's a place called Men Here in Preston, Happy Days in Preston. There's millions upon millions of different self-help kind of groups and clubs on Facebook that you can join, more specifically designed to what you're feeling. So some for anxiety, some for depression. It's all about looking and trying to find the right thing. Me personally, I run the dads groups. So I try and help dads, kind of give them a safe space to kind of chat and get things off the chest and open up. You'll find some will at the beginning, some will wait like months before they feel comfortable enough doing it, but at least they know that space is there, that they can do that. But these are all the same for the others. There's a guy called Mark Williams who founded International World Men's Mental Health Day. And that guy is currently doing all sorts of wonderful things for men's mental health, trying to improve services and trying to get things going. So I think going forward, there's going to be a lot more coming. But at the moment, it's all about signposting what we have and making sure that people know that services are about, whether they're free or any other different things that they have.
I know Elaine wants to probably talk about the Recovery College, but I'm gonna interject for her and say that we do a lot with the Recovery College. We're always posting their events out and everything. They have a lot going on. They've got a lot of mental health online courses, a lot of other courses and things. So we do a lot with them. And obviously we've got Gillian Brooks's event coming on soon that everybody should definitely get a ticket for that. And we have got a lot of groups coming into our Connect My Community NHS on Facebook to hopefully get out there. And Wellbeing Lancashire will be doing a lot to help in a lot more of the private companies as opposed to community group projects and things. So yeah, there will definitely be a lot. But what I wanted to do as well now is I wanted to open up a little bit to the room and everything, and any questions you got. So please happily unmute yourself. If you have a question, just let us know. If you want to ask any of the people that have been talking a question, that'd be great.
If you see on the bottom of the Zoom, there's reactions. So if you wanted to put your hand up, or just put your hand up on the screen, it doesn't really matter. If you wanted to ask a question, or in the chat room, whichever you. Oh, Paul's got a raised hand. Paul, would you like to? Yep.
I worked out how to do it almost immediately.
Yay!
That's a success for today.
Yeah, good.
No, I was just wondering that in terms of like the paucity of messages that are out there. Also, I think once I started moving in crisis circles, then all of a sudden it became really apparent how much support was out there, and that how the way I was feeling wasn't unusual. So it's almost like, how do you get those messages moved out of this community and into the wider community? And I'm wondering if that's something that the local NHS as such could start sharing via their Facebook and Twitter feeds and so on. And it almost takes it's taking the stigma out of mental health being this secondary little grubby issue that's hidden away in the corner, of saying that, just putting those facts out there that yes, it can be money, yes, it can be trauma, it can be relationships not working, it can be all kinds of things. And if you need help, signpost people to where there's help available, either in the community or wherever. But I think it's just that thing about making it mainstream. So at the moment, like I say, I just felt that if I'd have known that there was all this support out there in the background, I might have secretly gone for that support. And then if it wasn't for me, I might have carried on with me planning and so on. But, I never had that contact, because it was almost like, I don't want anybody to know that I'm actually planning this.
You're right. I mean,
sorry, go ahead, Graham.
You're right in what you're saying there, Paul. I mean, it does need a wider signposting, and obviously various different parts of the NHS could help with that. Me personally, I've been working alongside the maternity services for about 2.5 years now, and they've done amazing things for advertising what we do, getting the word out to dads, saying, look, there's a group here if you need them. They even have one of the Dad's Net banners in the entrance to Shara Green. But we speak to them regularly. We can't in contact them with them a lot. So we work kind of alongside them. But maybe, and again, same with Connect My Community. Elliot and his team have done brilliant for kind of getting our groups out there and letting them know where we are. But if we can somehow get into the others, even GPs is probably primary places to have these kind of things advertised, because when people are in waiting rooms for a cold, they'll see it and they'll remember it because they've seen it. So if something happens or someone they know is going through it, they could turn around and say, oh, I saw this leaflet for self-help or for women's groups or men's groups, why don't you try this? And at least then it's passed on.
I know one of the things that we're engaged with is it's a national parent carer group, which is funded by Charlie Waller Memorial. So what we've pulled together is a geographical where we have got that parent carer groups across the nation, and it will be a good way of signposting schools and GPs. So when a child presents it at GPs or school, they can say, well, actually, what support is a parent out there? And it would be good if we could maybe look at that for the central Lancashire and go, well, what support groups have we got within this area that we can signpost people to?
Well, one of the things that we have actually been doing with Connect My Community, and I appreciate that, Graham, is that we're trying to get a lot of the groups in the page, and we put it out there, and we are going to be doing a lot more offline once we're able to play out, so to speak. I was going to say that I've completely lost it there as we were talking. You have it, and then it just floats into the ether.
Cyberspace.
I know it well.
and everything. But no, yeah. Next.
Jenny,
Megan, did
sorry.
you want to speak? Megan. I know your name's not Megan. I've forgotten already.
Jenny.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Just from personal experience, my daughter she hung herself in May, and our experience was a lot different. She at that time was 15. We attempted again 2 weeks ago, and she's now 16. And I have entered the wonderful greyness that is age 16 to 18. Adult services won't take because you're under 18. That's a very, very lonely place. And I know I'm not the only one out there. That's my biggest concern at the moment, is there's very, very little information for this age group, the 16 to 18, the greyness. I've got in touch with the MP because I'm feeling, not just for me, I can live it, I'm doing it at the moment, but talking to the police on the day, they're pulling their hair out, they're feeling helpless, and that's where we're at the moment at this bit. And it's just what's out there for that age group.
Yeah.
And it's not just, like I say, it's not all just the mental health side of it, there's other aspects of it as well.
I think education, and we've mentioned this over and over again, but I honestly think we need to get it in schools and fast, for as young as, you know, primary school age.
But
we
they've
need to be
pulled
talking.
out all the nurses, haven't they? They've pulled out school nurses, the resources have all been pulled out. So the early intervention that we could see this coming, we saw this boulder rolling down this hill, and we reached out for all the help and nothing came. It was like we were never bad enough to need the help until it had hit the bottom and the avalanche had happened. And then you're told, well, she has to take responsibility for herself. And I'm there going, because she's 16 now. And I went, yes, she'll take responsibility because she'll do what she wants to do. She will kill herself. That's her responsibility. So it's a very, very hard road at the moment.
Oh gosh, that's so hard. Have you been part of groups? Do you mind me asking? Are you part of any groups or?
I'm part of Susie's group.
All right. Okay.
And we met through sitting in hospital together as parents.
With our daughters. Right. Yeah. Jenny was my inspiration for setting the group up.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
I'll put my hand up. Sorry.
Sorry,
Can I say something? Because I've had a similar experience. My eldest daughter is 23 years old. Really, really bubbly girl, really sociable. And in about May, because of the lockdown, she told me she was thinking about committing suicide. She's got everything going for her. She'd been put on furlough on a job. So I know she's not 16 to 18, but it's a similar sort of mentality because they're used to having like quite a good community, connecting with the Facebook. What I did find that with her, and I don't know whether it's happened with your daughter, is they were staying up all night with the friends on like Zoom and drinking. My daughter was, because she's 23, but they were a lot of the friends were staying up all night because they felt so cut off and isolated. Yeah. So it was about May when my daughter's like really, really positive, and it was just this isolation just floored her. Absolutely floored her. Yeah. So I think that's got an awful lot to do with it, because they're used to being so connected. I know it's mobiles, but they are used to being so connected these days. And then to be at that age, to be cut off from everybody, their friends, their community, is very, very hard for them.
Just say, Catherine, from like my daughter's point, it wasn't so much, and this is where it makes it a little bit more complicated for Megan, that she's had 42 surgery, so a lot of her stuff is through health. So, she's in a wheelchair, she's a wheelchair user. And a lot of my thing, I think, is the lack of joint up connection from all the different services that she goes to. Is it Leslie was saying about the nutrition? Megan's under an ED services, but yet they don't get invited to some of her meetings. And I'm a great believer the same, that I think nutrition's a big part of this. So I do think the lack of joint up from all services involved in not just children, everybody, because most people have got other services involved.
On that one actually as well, it's very interesting. I drank very heavily in my youth and everything, and I went to a point that I said I'm going to stop drinking. I did a cold turkey overnight and stopped drinking for like 4.5 years. Now I've got to the point that I can have a drink and just have one drink, which is great. But the stigma towards that was very interesting, because it was a lot of friends were like, what do you mean you're not drinking? So it's not a case of like, you know, if you decide to stop doing something, it's just, you know, I've stopped eating Brussels sprouts. Well, nobody cares. But if you were to stop drinking, it becomes a social thing, and that is wrong. So therefore, with it being the social side of things, of having the drinking, the alcohol, drug taking, all these other things, negative behaviours, being taken as social norms, and that lead into things like suicide, like mental health conditions, like other things, is another thing that needs to be addressed, and will actually be a future talk. So we will be doing that. We will definitely be doing that in a future talk, if people would like to have a future talk, obviously. You know? So I really appreciate that.
Penny has just put her hand up. Penny, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, I was just, well, a couple of things really. One is not to sort of preclude, I mean, you know, the faith communities. I'm on Preston Faith Forum, and the Faith Covenant, and in Preston, and we've done an awful lot of work on, you know, helping, as you know, like you say, as unfortunately as funding sort of dries up, and the government tends to turn to the faith communities to say, come on, how can you help? And I think, you know, getting the word out there that, you know, nobody's out to convert anybody. I mean, the word faith seems to be a dirty word, especially for young people, and also sort of, you know, for older people. And yet actually, you know, people of faith, or people who have any connection to that, you know, are there to sort of help. You know, we go into schools, we do a lot of befriending, we do a lot of work, you know, to help people. And I also sort of work as a chaplain in the sort of prison, where suicide is talked about all the time. So many people come in self-harming, and, you know, we have people on sort of suicide watch all the time. And it's such an easy subject, and that sounds terrible, but it's an easy subject on the sort of prison estate, but it's not an easy subject outside. And it's a shame that in a way that can't come out, if that makes sense, into the general mental welfare of the whole of the community. There is, and again, just a simple signpost, I mean, there is a drop-in centre in Preston now that opened last year called The Haven. Don't know if anybody's heard about it. Yeah, and that's just a sort of drop-in centre that, I mean, I was, you know, we actually own the building that they rent. And I was over the moon when they said that that's what they were going to open it as, because I mean, if Preston needs a drop-in centre, that it really does. And you know, I know that they're doing sort of sterling work, but under COVID, unfortunately, you know, things have closed down, and I think that's left a lot of people unable to access that. Same with GPs, etc. So, you know, I would just say there is help out there. You know, I say to sort of the prisoners when they're leaving, you know, we give them a sort of, you know, leaflet for sort of help out there. And basically a lot of that is they'll come back in and they'll say, you know, I've never ever gone to church, I've never bothered, but I've had so much help and support. And realise, like, exactly like you say, Miss, that there isn't, you know, nobody's trying to convert me. Nobody's trying to say, you know, you've got to be part of our faith even. Just go in anywhere and there will be somebody there to help you.
Thank you, Penny. And I think that's really important point is, you know, spiritually or faith, that you don't have to be converted, but there are people that really care. And I think that's the big thing here. We need more people who care. And I think, you know, in these groups, faith groups, generally, people are genuine and want to care. So we've come to 11:30 now, folks. I think we need to do a part 2 of this, don't you, Elliot? Honestly, I've learned so much today, and I hope you've really enjoyed it. And I think there's a lot to be taken away from today, and we do need to do more of it. Thanks again, Graham. Thank you for Susie, Gillian, and thank you, Jenny. Elliot, is there anything else you want to pop in? And thanks for everybody that came today. Really appreciate it. Can you spread the word about these CAD talks? And Elliot will tell you about the next one coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody for coming and sticking around and everything. Our next one is going to be next month. We haven't got a date on it yet. We're just going to confirm. But it is going to be mental health in the BME community in central Lancashire. It's very high in the agenda for a lot of things next month. I won't be hosting. Jackie will still be hosting. Sorry, I won't be hosting. It'll be one of our other team. Going to have a lot of good talkers on there as well. Love you to join in. And I think with the one after that, I think we're looking at around the alcohol, drug-related type stuff and everything. We haven't really got that nailed down. We wanted to see how this one went really before we went on to the next one. But we hope that you will all come and join us on Connect My Community NHS on Facebook and get your groups on there. And if you're not in a group, just come jump in anyway and get the conversations going. I probably would like to do another one of these for this particular subject, maybe about 6-12 months once we're outside of COVID, and see what the difference has been in COVID and outside of COVID, and see how those reactions could be. That could be a good way of looking at it.
And anybody, I've recorded this, so we will turn it into something.
Yes, yeah, we are going to put it into some sort of video.
It's the first one. Bear with us, and also I've saved the chat as well. So anybody wanted email addresses, connection. This is what it's all about. It's networking, connecting, even forming a new group. Why not? Some great people. The audience was great today, and I've learned so much from you, from lived experience. Thank you very much indeed. And has anybody got anything they'd like to say before we leave?
Just thank you.
No, thank you to everybody. Yeah. And I hope you've got some.
Thank you for watching. Tune in next month for mental health in the BAME community of Central Lancashire. CAD Talks is in partnership between the Community Asset Development Team of Central Lancashire NHS Trust and Wellbeing Lancashire.